As engineers, we're really good at engineering projects, but we don't always think about our own long-term financial health. And if we want to have a comfortable retirement, we need to be thinking about that now. So I'm thrilled today to have with me Bill Keene. Bill is the founder of Keene Wealth Advisors and the author of Keene on Retirement. He works with a lot of engineers and engineering firms on their financial future. And I'm thrilled to have him here today to talk about the current economic landscape and some things that we as engineers should be thinking about now for the long term. Let's jump right in. All right, now I'd like to welcome our guest on for today, or welcome him back to the show, Bill Keene, founder and CEO of Keene Wealth Advisors. He's also the author of the book Keene on Retirement, Engineering the Second Half of Your Life. Bill, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you, Anthony. It's just a privilege to be on again to your show. I believe this is number 4.
Yeah, you've been on quite a few times, and we always appreciate it. And for those listeners that maybe haven't caught any of those episodes yet, maybe you can give them just a quick intro for yourself.
For sure. Anthony, I operate what's called a registered investment advisor. And really the short version of that is we help folks think through their retirement planning issues, their financial planning issues. We are what's called a fiduciary. So we're not selling any specific product. We're more consultative in nature, but we do help folks think through what's their objective with their resources, with their dollars, and what are they working toward in their lives. And we look at things like tax and how things are titled, wills and trusts, but really building wealth, thinking that through as folks get started in their careers and working toward a time in their life where they can ultimately at some point retire, and then making sure that they handle their wealth in a way that they don't lose it, that it lasts the rest of their life. So many folks, including myself, started with nothing and can't even believe that at some point in the future we could be independently wealthy or be able to retire and live on what we've accumulated. And it's very possible. The nuance in my practice or our firm is that we deal with engineers. We have a very highly specialized niche in the engineering community nationwide. So we're grateful to have learned about how engineers think, what they expect, how they operate their lives, how they operate their projects in their career path, and how we can take some of those strengths and play that into how they are strong in their personal retirement plans as well. And also know some of the weaknesses that might exist as well and help them avoid some of the dangers and weaknesses that they might be suspect to as well. So I think it's a really great place to be. I've got, including myself, we have 14 financial advisors here at the firm. Most are either CFPs or credentialed advisors are on the track to be that. We have CPA as well. And so we have a lot of fun with advising engineers at all stages of their journey.
That's great. And I know from just knowing Bill and from a couple of his last interviews that his path to the financial world was born out of kind of some family struggles early on when he was a kid in terms of finances, which I always think is admirable because it talks about someone's passion behind what they do and why they do what they do. And so I know, Bill, that's always been a big motivating factor for you.
It has. I remember when I was 10 or 11, my father had a hard time keeping work. My parents were divorced. I lived with him. We lived in a small apartment. And I remember waiting for his unemployment check to come in, I think they came in, gosh, did they come in weekly? Maybe it was monthly. And the stress and anxiety around resources and not having enough cash. We know that money doesn't buy happiness per se. Like we talk about that generally. But here's what I do know for sure. And now I've been in practice in the industry for over 30 years. I can tell you that you cannot be the best version of yourself to your family, to your colleagues at work, to your clients, to your community, if you're riddled with strife and anxiety. Like it's impossible. So around money, because we live in a material world and we have to have some resources to exist to pay our bills. There was actually a study done and I talked about it in my book. They've determined, they put a number on how much will buy happiness. And depending on where you are in the country, it's somewhere between $60,000 and $75,000 a year of income actually buys happiness. And really what they're telling us is that it helps us get our bases covered. And from there, money doesn't buy happiness, but to a point, it sure as heck helps. So, but for me, I'm about the regular man or woman that starts out with very little, and empowering them to take personal responsibility, to build the life intentionally for themselves and their families, to be able to become independently wealthy. And I say that independently wealthy, it sounds so hoity-toity, but it's not. It means you have enough money at some point in the future that money serves you, that it serves you. You can live off that for the rest of your life. And that's just how I've dedicated my life and professional career to. That's why we do the podcast. That's why I'm appearing on yours. That's why I have mine. We write the books. It gets me up in the morning, and I'm just grateful to have that inspiration.
That's awesome. And so you mentioned that you work a lot with engineers. Can you talk to us about some of the myths out there about working with engineers or the engineering mindset?
Oh, for sure. In Kansas City, we have quite a few engineering firms. And so I'm headquartered in Overland Park, Kansas, which is the greater Kansas City area. And we have the Black and Veatch headquarters here. We have the Burns and McDonnell headquarters here. Recently had the CEO of Henderson and the CMO and the CFO, by the way, Henderson Engineers, who's headquartered here in Kansas City on my podcast, Keen on Retirement. There's other hubs here of engineering firms as well. So really an interesting engineering kind of a network here right in Kansas City. But I think what a lot of folks believe about engineers, and I can speak from my industry, at least when I'm speaking to other colleagues at conferences around the country, a lot of folks think that engineers are difficult to work with, that engineers might be too picky, or that they're so smart that they're going to be obsessive on things. They're going to come in with their myriad of spreadsheets, and they're going to be too questioning, or to have too high of standards, just difficult to work with, indecisive, maybe over analytic. And I'm going to call those myths, because, and it's not that there aren't some, but I would say that those select way against the average. Your typical engineer is someone who is actually just very thoughtful. Yes. Are they smart? Of course, they're very smart. You have to be smart and dedicated and committed to even get into the engineering community, to get the degrees, to get the credentials, to practice your profession. But really, engineers are very they're relationship oriented. They also love consulting because they've sold their brains their whole career. People paid them for their expertise outside of their field of expertise. So when an engineer gets to the point of knowing, hey, I'm not an expert in this financial advisory, this financial management, this building wealth, I'm going to seek help, and I'm not afraid to engage with a professional that understands it. So they're not afraid to delegate, which is really, really cool too. Do they have high standards? Of course they have high standards, but if you can operate as a professional to their standards, you can do very well for yourself. In fact, I'm a pilot, so I'm a checklist-driven, process-oriented person. So we've created processes and checklists here at our firm that I think our engineering clients just absolutely love, because they know we have a process we're going through. This isn't just some firm winging it. So in my opinion, engineers' networks are deep. They're usually folks that are usually grateful and humble on most days, people that are committed to the long term, that are hard workers, that live within their means, which is also important. People that live within their means. Most engineers are not out overspending. They're willing to look at a plan and stay within the confines of the plan. And so those myths that I talked about, hey, let all the other financial advisors think those are true, because I love our engineering clients. I'm very grateful for the folks that we work with.
That's great. Yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot of a lot of skill sets and characteristics of engineers that help us to be able to, understand finance, process finances. Obviously, it's great to have an expert like yourself to guide us through it, but it's nice to be able to process it. And with all that being said, we're currently in the midst of high inflation, higher interest rates, and kind of a prolonged bear market here. And these things are all over the news, all over the headlines. So how are you dealing with this environment with your engineering clients, Bill?
Yeah, it's so great to be back on your program after my prior appearances, because the first appearance that I made with you, the first edition of the book had just come out, and we had a real nice chat generally about about the book and about financial independence and about the planning that goes along with and the investments that fund the plan, and how I see folks get to a point of being able to be in a position of retirement if they want. Some don't. COVID had not happened yet. And you had me back on right in the midst of COVID. And some of the principles that I talked about on that first episode were coming right into play when we were back on. And I actually personally went back and watched that episode because I learn a lot. Anthony, I learn a lot from I call these video diaries that we're creating. So you and I right now are creating a video diary, and you've done this all the videos and all the podcast episodes you have out there. Me as well. I've got about 7 years worth of my own Keen on Retirement. You can see what we were saying. You can see what we were thinking. You can see how we were responding in times that were questionable, that were scary. And so we talked about getting through the midst of that COVID in the depth. I did your podcast in, I believe it was March of 2020. I mean, everything had just hit. Things were shut down, and we talked about some of the things that we would want to stay the course and not be afraid, not make emotional knee-jerk reactions. Came back on again with you to talk about the election that was coming up. There's a ton of emotion around major elections, folks maybe abandoning their investment if based on who gets elected, those types of things. We tried to put that at bay. And then here we are today. Now the COVID correction, the COVID crash, if you will, that we talked about, it was very quick, and we recovered very quick. So it was like the quickest recession we had ever seen in the history of our country, and it rebounded faster than it's ever rebounded also. So we entered 2022 with all the cash awash, and you might recall you were concerned. You asked some very valid questions about all the money the government was printing to get us through COVID.
Right.
Like, what the heck is going on here? You said, what about inflation? So you were predictive. You were predictive about what might happen with all this money being printed. And now here we come into 2022, and then, now we're in 23, but the year of 2022, we saw the inflation come home to roost. We saw the S&P market, the broad market, down about 26% at the low, and we saw the NASDAQ market down about 36% at the low, give or take. So that's where we see the market goes from all-time highs, and it goes into what we call a bear market. That's when it goes down 20% or more, and it pulls off from those highs, and then we're in a bear market. So right now we're in a bear market. It's not until we determine that it hit a bottom and it goes back up to all-time highs again, where we see it, what we call the bull market. And I'm going to share some data with you about the length and the depth of bear and bull markets for our audience today. I think it's going to be very impactful. But your question is, how am I working with people? And I recapped our prior episodes because I think it's important to learn. There's wisdom even in our short 3-year journey together to capture and learn from. And the thing that's most important, no matter what's going on in the capital markets with interest rates, inflation, and the stock market, bear market, the bull market, everybody shares the same goal. I believe we have one goal in that we share, and that's that someday we hope we want to know that we could retire if we wanted to. So we want to look up and say we did what we needed to do as young people, and then not so young people, to look up and have enough money saved along with other resources and assets that we have, that work becomes optional. So I believe we all share that. And to do that, you have to have a financial plan. So there's no way of getting out of it. It would be just like starting a project without blueprints, saying, well, we're just going to wing this. We're not even going to bid this appropriately. We're going to guess on the bid, and then we're going to just start building. I mean, we know that can't happen. It's not going to end well. So knowing that a financial plan is a must, every one of our engineer clients has a financial plan that we go back to in times like this. We're constantly evolving that financial plan with statistical modeling and showing that, look, you're at a point now, even our retired clients, if they're set up appropriately, these are nothing but opportunities. These pullbacks in the market are opportunities if they're established right. And for young people, this is an opportunity to continue to add more shares cheaper, to actually increase 401k contributions, to understand the rules around your company plans, and to lean into the downturn as opportunistic, not let it scare you out of doing what's right.
Yeah, that's awesome. I really like that. And one of the things that I like about that a lot is we do a lot of project management training for engineering companies. And one of the things that, and this may be a helpful analogy for our listeners, is when you have a plan that you're going to, a project you're going to manage, you want to have a project management plan, also known as a PMP, which kind of outlines everything about the project, who you're going to communicate with, the stakeholders, et cetera. And that's kind of similar to like a financial plan, right? Like everyone should
Yes,
have a financial plan. Without a financial plan, how do you know how to navigate things? Same thing, Bill's a pilot, same thing as a flight plan. You can't go on a flight without a flight plan, right? So I think as engineers, we can gravitate to that because we know when we're managing our project, we need a project management plan. So, if you're trying to oversee your own finances, whether you're at a firm level or individually, it's good to have a sound financial plan. And just like a project management plan, it has to be dynamic because things are going to change. Things always change.
that's right.
And as the leader, you need to then adjust that plan going forward. And I think that that's just from my experience of working with Bill. I know him and his team are very focused on not just creating the right plan, but then updating it. And you're right, meeting with your clients, meeting with these firms and saying, hey, where are we at today? Because it's different than 12 months ago. Let's see what adjustments we can make.
That's right. And you are different. Your thoughts, your vision on the future may have changed as well. So all this is very dynamic. And hey, thank goodness. It would be a really boring life if we didn't have to update things and things didn't change. I think it would be important. You mentioned the PMP and the plans. Just to give a quick update on what is a financial plan? Like it's easy to say that, but what should it include, and how do you think about it? And so the first thing I want someone to do when they think about their own personal financial plan is, first off, take it seriously, because nobody else will. It's on you to be personally responsible for your plan. And it's easy to think, well, that's so far down the road, I'll do it later. But please, I ask you not to think about putting this off, but look at yourself like a project or even like a business, and look at your balance sheets. The first place to start is looking at your balance sheet. What are your current assets? And you can do this on a spreadsheet. What are your current assets, your home, your car, your assets that you would give value to? And then what are your current debts? Just kind of take a look at that. If you're just getting started out and you have a home mortgage or car loans, it's okay. Just put it out on paper and get what we call a net worth. Current assets minus current debts. What's left? Hopefully there's something. And if not, we're going to work on that to get some of that debt paid down and build some wealth. But you have a starting point. You have what we call a net worth. And that's a measuring point. I like to say what gets measured gets done. And what doesn't get measured never gets done, in my opinion. It's by accident, and that doesn't happen very often. So then we want you to look at your income statement. I'm talking about this like a business, but this is your personal life. What is your current income? And what is your current expenses? So what's coming in and what's going out? And yes, you look at your paycheck stubs. What are you clearing after taxes, after your saving, after health insurance, so forth? And then what are you spending money on? And you need to get aware of that. So again, nobody's going to do this for you. This is on you to do this. And even if you have to back it up and do something that might seem very elementary to some of you, but that would be to look at every penny that you spend. So really document it. Some people do this already. I do have some engineering clients that do this already by nature. They've just done it their whole life, but they look at where every dollar, every penny goes. So they're aware of what they're spending, because we can get really unaware. In some cases, we don't want to know, kind of like we don't want to know what the calories are when we go to eat at a restaurant. I don't like it when they put those on the menu because it makes me feel guilty. But in this case, we want to know what we're spending, because we can't make a beginning until we know what reality is. Okay, so those are two things that are very important. And then we want to consider the levers for a financial plan. Okay, a current assets, our savings amount, what we're able to save, our time until we want to be financially independent or able to retire at some point in the future, what those income needs might be at that point. And it could be really hard to understand that if you're 30 years out or more, but starting to think about it is powerful. And then what would the life expectancy be for you and your spouse if you have a spouse? And then what would the investment return be over time? Like, these are the levers, these are the inputs around beginning to formulate a real plan that you're looking at for the future. And of course, you're going to have things in before retirement, such as buying homes and taking vacations and putting kids through college and buying cars, things like that. We work those in as well. But I'm just trying to give you and your audience, Anthony, like a baseline for getting their mind around what this looks like to make a beginning.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. And I love the whole thing you talked about with the, looking at your net worth and just looking at your expenses. I know I did this a couple of years back, And my wife and I have 3 kids, and it's like, if we go to a restaurant once a week on the weekend, we're spending $100+ to go out to the restaurant with 5 people. You do
That's
that
right.
once a week, you're spending $500 minimum a month at $6,000 a year, right? So, when you start to look at these things, you kind of can make some adjustments and start to save some real money. And, we try to be frugal here. We drive Hondas, they're paid off, things like that. But at the end of the day, you want to have a plan so you're monitoring those things so that you can figure out the best ways to kind of build wealth over time. And, one of the things that we could jump to and talk a little
Sure.
bit about, Bill, is, maximizing benefits and minimizing taxes for engineers with company plans like 401ks and ESOP plans and stuff like that. And I think that that's something that's very relevant, because I think most of our listeners probably have one of those benefits available to them with the companies they work for. Maybe you could talk a little bit about how they might approach that, or what they should know as the individual with these plans potentially out there for them.
Yeah, I'd love to. And you're going to laugh, but I had run a calculation before our show today, and that $500 a month that you just talked about spending on eating out,
Yeah.
$500 per month at 9%, which is a little bit less than the long-term average of the stock market. I know sometimes it feels like it doesn't make much or it goes down like this year, but the average has been 10% long-term. $500 a month at 9% for 30 years is $915,000.
There you go.
So there you go. There's your you're on the way to that, to being that multimillionaire there, just by that $500 a month. 1,000 a month is 1.8 million.
Wow.
So anyway, some very powerful numbers there. We just get started. Yeah. So the benefits are so important to understand, and this is a place where one of the downfalls, I said at the start of the program, that we harness the opportunities and the strengths of our engineering clients. We really try to help them harness that for their financial planning. But there are also areas where I see them falling short. And one of those areas is they tend to be amazingly focused on their careers, and their work ethic is unbelievable. A lot of them are working 78 hours a week. They don't go to 40 hours until later in their career, when they go part-time, which is kind of funny. I'm going to go part-time, which equals 40 hours. I see that a lot in the big companies, at least. Hopefully we're getting away from some of that. But I see them not focusing on their personal financial plans as much as they do their jobs, their work, also their health too. By the way, I see a lot of folks not wait till too late to focus on their health. So this isn't a health program, but I would consider and recommend folks look at their health not when they retire, but now. We don't want to be the person that got lung cancer from smoking that decided to stop smoking after the diagnosis. And that's the same thing for financial planning. But digging in with wherever you are employed, if you're self-employed, there might be folks out there that are self-employed engineers. That might not be the majority, but there are retirement plans that you can look at. SEP accounts, simple accounts. These are names the IRS gives to be able to put money away, and in most cases, it's going to be pre-tax dollars. If you work for a big firm, you likely have what's called a 401k. That's just a tax code in the IRS, but it's become almost like saying Coke or Xerox. A 401k means your retirement plan at work, and it allows you to put money aside before taxes come out of your income. And there's some new rules this year. They've raised the amount you can put away up to $22,500. For anybody to put in that 401k pre-tax, and then your company likely has a match that would go in on top of that. Now, some companies also allow you to put money in after taxes, and you can put in north of 60,000 total. It's the 22.5 would be pre-tax. The additional would be after tax if your company allows it. Now, you might be saying, Bill, come on now. You're talking some big numbers here. We don't have that much to put away. I'm just giving you what's available.
Right.
Okay, so some of these 401ks also have what are called Roth options. In fact, most do. The Roth option says you don't get a tax deduction up front, but the money grows tax free forever. And that can be a very powerful mechanism. Now, ideally, you would max your 401k, and we help folks determine based on their income, and if they're married, their spouse's income. Should they do the 401k pre-tax, or should they do the Roth, or some combination? And then also, ideally, you would do Roth IRAs or some sort of investment, but Roths are so powerful. outside of the 401k as well. And those limits are 6,500 this year. So,
Wow.
if you're over 50, you can put an extra 7,500 also, by the way, into your 401ks. So you can get up to the 30 grand pre-tax in a 401k. Those are called catch-up provisions. And on the Roths, you can put over 1,000 more in those as well. So
That's
those are
awesome.
called catch-up provisions. These are things you have to know about and think about. How am I going to do this? And for a company, a lot of the engineering firms, architectural firms, construction firms, a lot of engineering firms have what are called ESOP plans, employee stock ownership plans. And I didn't know if you wanted me to talk about that a little bit today or not, Anthony.
You know what, Bill? I think we're probably going to have you to do a whole episode on that, quite frankly, because
Okay.
I know I've listened to your episode on it. I know there's a lot of things we can cover, but definitely, if
Okay.
you're a subscriber to the podcast, be aware that we're going to have Bill on and do a whole episode on ESOPs. And we're actually going to go on LinkedIn and ask for some questions, Bill, from engineers and their firms on ESOPs. So we can kind of do it as a very relevant Q&A for you. And you can really speak to the needs and questions of our community on ESOPs specifically.
Okay. That's amazing. That's amazing. I look forward to that. But I've seen a lot of firms with ESOPs, a lot of wealth being created, a lot of lives really changed because of the power of an ESOP plan. So we'll hold that thought. But if you have the opportunity to be invested in an ESOP, know that it's an amazing, amazing opportunity for you and your family to be an employee owner and to build wealth for you later in life. And it's something that you don't have to put any of your own money into. So if you have an ESOP, that does not mean don't do what I just said around the 401k and Roths. Okay, I'll leave you with that for now. Continue to take responsibility for your own situation, save money. The ESOP, consider it just a bonus, and we'll go from there at the next episode.
No, for sure. I want to do that because I think we do get questions on that. Now, I want to go back to your book for a second, Keen on Retirement. The second edition came out. I've read the first edition. I just got the second edition. I want to, learn about the updates from you here in a minute. But one of the things that I want to mention about the book is I think the world of retirement can be very confusing for a working engineer who's not going to retire for 20, 30, whatever years, right? So it's hard to understand how saving now, what we need to do now. And one thing that I really like about Bill's book is he just breaks things down very practically and very simple and takes you through the different avenues, maybe some of the financial tools that are out there and available to help you kind of think about building wealth over the long term. And so, Bill, what I'd like you to do is just quickly give us an update on what was, I guess, new in the second edition.
Yep. So a couple of things that I added. First, we went through. You said earlier that these things they evolve. That we have to continue to update our personal financial plans. So true. Well, I had to update my book as well because it was 3 years old, and just shortly after the book published in 2019, some tax laws changed that were meaningful enough that I felt I needed to go back and refresh the book based on current tax law around IRAs and some of the things that we discuss. The other thing that happened, though, is that we had just come through a global pandemic like we hadn't seen for 100 years in our country. None of us would have ever obviously remembered what that was like from 100 years ago. We could have read about the one at the turn of the century before, but we lived through something that deserved to be documented and discussed and to learn from the wisdom of all having navigated through that. We lived through the worst, the quickest recession we'd ever been through and deepest and the quickest recovery. And we also had a lot of things coming at us that I would call, we call it flash in the pan in the book. What I mean by avoiding the next flash in the pan, which is the name of the title, is of the chapter. What I mean is avoiding fad investments, avoid getting sucked into get rich quick schemes. Now, I had this manuscript done before the FTX debacle happened. So I talk in this avoiding get rich quick schemes and avoiding the flash in the pan about, look, we know what works long term. We know that a diversified portfolio of mostly stocks when you're younger will get you to your destination. We will have volatility over time. In fact, the market goes through a major correction about every 5 to 7 years, a major bear market, and then we have typically every year we have about a 14% decline from peak to trough every year in the equity markets. I don't want people to think that that's not normal. That's very normal. What we're going through right now in the equity markets is just garden variety normal, and it does nothing but give those that are still investing an opportunity to buy more shares cheaper. And I don't want to downplay the idea that we see our wealth temporarily decline, but it's important to understand that these market corrections that we go through, the bear markets, they are temporary corrections amongst the permanent advance. They're temporary. We're in a temporary decline as we go through this permanent advance. And one of the things I mentioned in there, Anthony, is to help people have perspective on it and not get caught up in the headlines of the day. Think about where the Dow was when the year you were born. So go back. When we get off here, people can go back and Google where the Dow or S&P was the year they were born. I can tell you that mine in 1968, not to date me, the Dow was at about 800, and today it's at 34,000. In 1950, and this is going to date me even more, but in 1950, when North Korea crossed the 38th parallel to actually invade South Korea, this is one 73-year-old person's lifetime, right? So this is like a person that's in retirement right now, a 73-year-old person, 73 years. Dow was at 200. Today it's at 34,000. It's up 170 times, not 170%. I'm talking 170 times.
Yeah, that's why
the markets are up. So here's why I'm giving you that history. I'm giving you that history because the power of the capital markets is so great, but most people are not trained on this. They don't train us in college and school, even in financial planning college. We recruit a lot of young people out of these colleges that have financial planning degrees now. They're not making the emphasis on. They do a great job. They haven't prepared, but you get into the real world and you start realizing, look, we go through these temporary declines in the markets. A lot of people get afraid. They sell their investments. They stop making 401k investments because they think their money's just evaporating. No one's taken the time to sit back and have them look at the longer term approach of how the power of the capital markets. Like, you live in the United States and you have a decent job and you have the ability to put money in these plans like we talked and participate in the capital markets via ETFs and indexes and different investments, mostly stock when you're young. It would be impossible not to be a multimillionaire if you just let it happen. You just didn't overthink it or get sucked into these schemes, I call them, these flash in the pans. And so I wanted to talk to your listeners today about, what do you think, okay, a flash in the pan or a get rich quick thing would be? Well, let's look at who advertised in 2022 Super Bowl. So about a year ago or so, based on the time we're recording this. Anthony, do you have any idea who might have where I'm going with this?
Kind of, but I'll let you go through it.
Okay, so we have to resist the urge to get sucked into what we think is hot. And I mentioned when I first started talking about this chapter that we wrote, talking about avoiding. I don't want to say that the Bitcoin and the digital currencies are completely worthless. Like, I think there's a place for the blockchain, the technology that's behind some of these things. But if you look at these assets that don't have earnings, they don't have any intrinsic value. It's just based on who's going to pay more for it later. We saw a massive meltdown we have this year in those areas. And we never at Keen Wealth, we never got sucked into putting in client money into any digital currencies. And I haven't done it myself personally, just a full disclosure. But here's 6 of the companies that advertised in last year's Super Bowl, paid the $6 or $7 million for the 30 seconds. FTX was one. FTX is now down. Most of your listeners probably realize the meltdown, the fraud that's been brought out, and we'll see how it plays out. 98%. So if you had invested in that advertisement, you're down 98%. Coinbase was another. It's down 83%. They advertised in the Super Bowl. Carvana, which had a huge upturn as a result of COVID, but the company was mismanaged. Carvana is down 97%, in my opinion, ready to go bankrupt. Rocket Mortgage was another one. Rocket Mortgage, online thing. Interest rates were super low. Company mismanaged. It's down about 40% here through the early January. And I could go on. Peloton and Zoom, a couple more companies that got completely crushed. It's interesting to see that, though, those are the companies that are advertising, spending millions and millions of dollars to put themselves right in front of your face, tempting to want to go all in one of those and try to make a shortcut. And shortcuts just are not for the long-term investor. It would just be like shortcutting a project or saying, well, let's use a little different steel. We don't need to use the steel that's required for this bridge. It's a lot cheaper to go a little bit less. It just doesn't work. And finally, Anthony, let me tell you, time passes quickly. I have a blog that I wrote that talks about why time speeds up as we get older. There's actually, it doesn't speed up. I mean, of course it doesn't speed up, but why does it feel like it speeds up as we get older? We all say that, oh yeah, time really speeds up. Well, time passes quickly. And I think we all would agree on that. And if we have our plan in place and we're not trying to take these shortcuts, we're not trying to do things outside our plan, we don't compromise our plan. We have a plan and we work the plan. Time now becomes your friend. The more time that passes, that's part of it. It's discipline, it's the seed, the investment, and then time is what makes this thing work, much like planting a crop. But if you don't have your things set up right and you're constantly getting sucked into these offshoot investments, these get rich quick schemes that a lot of times just completely go poof, now all of a sudden time is your enemy. And you're going to look up and be my age, 54 or older, and say, wow, I wish I would have got my ducks in a row. And now I don't want to say it's never too late to do the right thing, but you'll never get those 30 years back. So you walk into a casino, the worst thing that can happen to you is you can win. You win at the casino, you think you figured it out. Time is your enemy at the casino, even if you win early.
Right.
Do you agree? You
no,
agree?
yeah, I hear you. I agree with it. And I think what you're saying is, and I think engineers would like to hear this, is to build wealth, you need to have, be consistent over time. You can't you can't follow every shiny target that pops up, right? I mean, I know there's a lot more that goes into that than that, but the point being is that there's a lot of stuff out there that we see. And it looks good to us. It looks good. It looks like, hey, that's like the sexy pick today. Let's go with this. Let's go with that. And I think the whole idea is you need to have that financial plan, like Bill said earlier, which is going to help you stay focused on your goals and seek professional advice. I mean, listen, you wouldn't want someone to go do engineering on your house or a bridge without talking to an engineer, obviously. So, why would we try to make important future financial decisions without talking to a financial expert, right? And I think that that's a big thing. And I think what I'd like to do here, Bill,
Yes.
to try to wrap us up for today is, I know you have like 5 to 7 quick hit actionable items that engineers can focus on financially. Can you kind of run through those as we wrap up?
I sure can. It would be an honor. So, I said earlier, treat your financial plan as serious as your work project. Put together an inspiring vision of your future that you are able to reverse engineer. Anthony mentioned going to a financial advisor. Unfortunately, there's lots of different variations of quality in financial advisor around the country. But if you do this yourself or find somebody, typically a fiduciary, to help you do this, that's going to be the first step. The second step would be understanding your options wherever you're working and maximizing your retirement contribution. So I want you to live today. I want you to enjoy life today. If you strap yourself too much because you're saving too much, here's going to happen. It's going to be like coming off of a tough diet. You're going to say heck with it at some point and just throw in the towel, and you might abandon the process. So I want you to find a middle ground on making sure you're maximizing it to a point and still enjoying life as we move through these levels. 6 months of emergency reserve is going to be something I recommend for everybody, not only individuals, but companies. COVID unmasked a lot of individuals and companies, unfortunately, that didn't even have 6 months of emergency reserve. Look at what it takes to pay your bills monthly and have at least 6 months sitting at the bank. And with that in mind, call the bank and make sure today that you request they actually pay you an interest rate on your demand deposits there at the bank. Rates have risen since I've last been on the show, and we have short-term rates well over 3% now. So banks should be paying you on your bank balances. So a piece of advice I have for you today, most banks are not going to call you, in fact, none that I know of, and tell you, hey, rates have risen. We see we're only paying you 0.1% on your balances. We should be paying you 3%. They will not do that. It almost seems fraudulent to me that they should have to do that, but they do not. It requires you to reach out to them and say, hey, what's going on? Rates have risen. Pay me more on my bank balances. I would also say make sure your assets are titled correctly. And we can talk a little more about this maybe on a future episode, but if you're married, make sure you've got the beneficiaries set up correctly. If you have kids, the same thing. If you have a will or a trust, at least go in and make sure your assets are titled right and you have beneficiaries updated on your accounts if something were to happen to you. And finally, as wonderful as it is to auto invest in 401ks, that means money comes out before you see it. It's a very powerful, simple tool. It almost seems too simple, but for people of all wealth levels, having things come out automatically before you see the money is one of the most powerful tools ever. And so not only for your 401k, but also maybe for your Roth IRA or outside investments, setting up something automatically and then living on what's left each month is going to be an amazing tool for folks. Steer clear of fad investments. Stay in your lane and don't get sucked into things that compromise your long-term plan. If you want to do something like that, maybe allocate 4 or 5%, 3% of your total assets to have some play money, to learn, to try some things, but do not compromise your long-term plan for something. I call them shiny objects, and they will appear nonstop in your life.
Man, awesome advice there. We're going to take all of those points and put them into the show notes here on the Engineering Career Coach podcast. So you can visit the episode show notes, go through them all. Once again, I want to thank Bill Keene. Again, Bill's the author of Keene on Retirement. I'm, thrilled to have him on as kind of our financial expert here. And also you can visit his website at keenwealthadvisors.com. There you can find his book. There you can find his blog. There you can find his podcast. Bill, it's awesome always to have you on. We're grateful that you constantly give your time to the podcast, and we are definitely going to look to do that ESOP episode here in the next couple of months. So if you do have questions on ESOPs, you know where to find me on LinkedIn. You can message them to me. You can go to our website, engineeringmanagementinstitute.org, put them in, and we will get Bill to come back on here and share some more expertise around that important topic. Bill, couldn't thank you more. Thanks so much for coming back on again.
Anthony, you're very welcome. I did want to make an offer to your viewers. Yeah. I did this before and you thought I was kind of crazy to do it, but I did it. But I do have the Keen on Retirement Engineering Second Half of Life, second edition. I'm willing to send those out to your audience at no cost. So I've done this in the past, and we had a ton of people that sent me notes, but it's just part of kind of my mission. I love what I do. And so I've got these, we're stocked. And if anybody would like a copy, a hardback copy, I'll personalize it for you. Send me an email at bkeen@keenwealthadvisors.com. And for Anthony's audience, just make sure you put Anthony Fasano podcast. You saw it there. My team will send one out to you at my expense. I just want to make that offer to you.
No, that's very generous, Bill. We appreciate that. I'm sure the listeners do, and hopefully we'll take advantage of it. And we look forward to having you back on the podcast once again very soon.
All right. Thanks, Anthony. We'll talk soon.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Bill. I know we focus a lot here on career development, but from time to time, we like to check in on things like personal finance because it is something that contributes to your success and happiness as an engineer. Please consider subscribing to our channel here. We put out videos like this on a weekly basis to help engineers become better managers and leaders. I'll see you next week.